I'm Dan. I would prefer Grover sneakers myself, but everyone has their own favorites. So I run social media over at Sesame Street. Technically, I'm something called the Director of New Media Communications at Sesame Workshop. But yeah, social guy at Sesame is much more fun. By a show of hands, how many of you have never heard the word Sesame Street before? Every once in a while, there's one or two, and I don't know what to do about those. So if you haven't, I'm sorry, you're going to be a little bit lost. I really can't fix that. We've been around for 43 years. Most of you know Elmo or Cookie Monster, Big Bird, Oscar the Grouch, Bert and Ernie. I'm sure each of you have your favorites. Again, Grover. You also probably know the human characters too, Maria, Gordon, and a lot of you remember when Mr. Hooper died. In fact, I'm going to talk about a human character today, which is kind of rare, right? Because everyone thinks, Sesame Street Muppets. They don't think about the people in the Sesame Street neighborhood. So why Gordon? So for most of our 40-year history, he was the subject of a pretty fascinating little mystery. But I'm going to start back in 1968. So we put together this just amazing anthology of our history for our 40th anniversary. That's 2009. And we went back all the way to 1968 when we had these test pilots that we put together. And test pilots are like any other TV pilot. We're testing to see how they work, how they resonate. And for us, because we're a research-based organization, we also wanted to make sure children were learning. And most of these test pilots have been lost to antiquity. The rumor around the office is that they were lost in a fire, but no one really knows. One of them, thankfully, was preserved, and I'm going to show you a clip of it in a second. It features Gordon, and it's brought to you today by the letter D for dance. Can you run the clip?
Hey there, what's your face? Sitting in the same place, staring at the TV, looking kind of weedy, getting kind of sleepy underneath your teepee. Time to prime the pump up. Everybody jump up. Everybody dance.
1968, I mean, what do you want me to do? That's a creepy looking Ernie. Bert's going to be even stranger, let me warn you. That's how it should be. The music stops, so I don't know why.
That's another D word. Dance.
So why did I show you a clip from 1968? I mean, I have literally 43 years of content to show you, and I showed you literally the first thing that we have. And the reason is that, well, that guy who played Gordon, we didn't know who he was. Like, as in, we don't know his real name, or we didn't for a while. So we knew that after the test pilot was shot, he was replaced by an actor named Matt Robinson. Matt Robinson, who happens to be the father of Holly Robinson Peete, is traditionally considered the first Gordon. Matt Robinson was there for 3 seasons, replaced by a man named Hal Miller. Hal Miller was then there for 2 seasons, replaced by a man named Roscoe Orman. But the guy in the video, we have no idea who he is. It's been Roscoe Orman ever since. So when we put together this this anthology of Sesame history, and it's this huge book. It's just too heavy for me to carry. I would have had one with me in my bag, but it just doesn't fit. We went through like closets of stuff, right? Like photos and documents. We interviewed people who have been with the show since day one. The 2 founders of the show are still involved with the organization. 2 of the actors who you saw in that are still on the show. The guy who and if in case you didn't know this, Big Bird's a puppet, but don't tell anybody. So the guy who plays Big Bird, he's been playing Big Bird all 40 years, all 43 years. So we have like a huge amount of institutional memory, but we just had no idea who this guy was. And we'd asked everyone we knew. So last fall I said, well, I have an idea. Why not just ask the rest of the world, right? We have this thing called the internet. Let's do it. So what did we do? We wrote up the story I just told you, and we put it up on sesamestreet.org with that video that you just watched. And we linked to it from everywhere. So, sent it to our 500,000 Twitter followers, put it up on all of our Facebook pages, on our Tumblr, it made the front page of Reddit. All said and all done, I think, probably a couple 100,000 to maybe even a few million saw our message saying, help, we don't know who this guy is. And of course, answers started pouring in, and the answers were, as you could have guessed, absolutely wrong. Right? People were saying, oh, I looked it up on Wikipedia and the first Gordon was Matt Robinson. I'm like, no, that's not what we're looking for. And then, I actually met Roscoe Orman, who's the current Gordon, for the first time a couple days later, and he said, what's going on here? My agent calls me and says, everyone's looking for me. What did I do? So I apologize for that one. That was my fault. But a couple weeks later, not even, maybe the next Tuesday, I get an email, and the email comes with it a picture of our mystery Gordon, and it's a photo we've never seen before. The person who sent it to me was the guy's daughter, and I spoke to her and I spoke to her sister over the course of the next couple weeks, and we verified that, yes, this guy was her father. His name was Garrett Saunders, and unfortunately, he passed away in the 80s. But, just through this stroke of luck, we were able to connect with his family. How did it happen? Mr. Saunders' nephew was watching his local TV broadcast one morning, and the TV broadcast thankfully covered our campaign. He saw it and called up his cousins and said, hey, wait, was your dad ever on Sesame Street? And they said, no, he wasn't. So what happened was, back in 1968, when he was on our test pilot, they were already way out of the age 2 to 5 range, which is your typical Sesame Street audience range. And I guess he never told them. So they had no idea. Only when they looked at the video and said, wait, that's definitely our dad. What's going on here? Did they put it together? And when we actually did connect with them, they were surprisingly ecstatic. So we never thought this could happen when we put this together, but we were just out there to solve a mystery. But what we actually created for them was this family treasure. So their father had been had done a lot of traveling theater in the 1970s and into the 1980s. And now, nowadays we take this for granted because this is being live streamed and we all have camera phones that take video, except for me because for some reason I have a BlackBerry. And there used to be flip cams and handheld cameras and whatever. But in the 70s and 80s, things weren't video recorded. If one of the theaters he performed at was really cutting edge, maybe there was something on Betamax. But even then, that was definitely lost to posterity. So before his daughter saw this clip, they didn't have a video of their father at all, let alone one of him performing. They didn't have one of him at all. And even more importantly, Mr. Saunders' granddaughter, who he never met, had never heard her grandfather speak, never heard his voice. So we were able to, create this permanent memory for them that, we never intended to do. 20 years ago, none of this could have ever happened, right? 20 years ago, the proverbial haystack, it was way too large and the needle way too small. And, our method collectively of searching that haystack was insufficient, right? The guy before me was talking about how there's all this data and we're trying to figure out how to search it now, and it seems like a huge problem now. Well, imagine what it was like then before we had all of this. But now our lives are so interconnected through the web and through social media that the social media generation, really all of us and all of you, we made this possible. We made this possible for us to solve a pretty fun little mystery, but for a family to get a memory that they never thought they'd have. So on behalf of all of us, thank you very much.